Welcome to Peachtree Accounting Video 5, putting in more transactions. The transactions we will now put in will cause the existing numbers to accumulate. This is now the first time we have a second transaction with the same account or one of the accounts that's already shown in the trial balance. The existing numbers in the trial balance will go up. Notice now the balance of cash is $6,000. However, the next transaction reads, on November 5th, A. Glover withdrew $400 for his personal use. This is going to make the balance of cash go down. And if it goes down by $400, logically we should be left with a debit balance of $5,600. You will also notice that the withdrawals account is not currently here, but as soon as we make this journal entry, the withdrawals account will show up here in the amount of $400. Once again, from the main menu, we click Tasks, General Journal Entry, and now we will record the debit and the credit. It was November 3rd, so we click once here, November 5th, click once here, and we click on the 5th. Then we click in the field for General Ledger, click on the magnifying glass, and we know that this will be withdrawals. A. Glover withdrawals will be the debit for $400. And we know that cash will be the credit account for $400. And these will be put in exactly the same way we put them in before. When we click Save, we can now reopen our trial balance and check the numbers. Reports and Forms, General Ledger trial balance, and you now notice that cash has been reduced to the amount of $5,600, and for the very first time, A. Glover withdrawals appears here in the debit column for $400. The next transaction is dated November 7th, paid wage expense $1,400. Can you predict what the results will be if we record wage expense as $1,400? That's right. Cash will decrease by $1,400 and become $4,200 after this transaction is entered. And of course, we do not see wage expense, so for the very first time, wage expense will show up in the debit column as $1,400. By now you remember it is Tasks, General Journal Entry, in order to open this nice important window here. Okay. The date, click once on the calendar box to bring the picture of the calendar. Click on the day of the month and Peachtree puts in the date. Click in the account field. The icon shows up. You click on it. Now we know this is going to be wage expense debit in the amount of $1,400. And we know it's going to be cash credit in the amount, cash credit in the amount of $1,400. Now let's see if the results are what we expect them to be after saving this transaction. In order to do that, in order to check the results, we will go back to Reports and Forms, General Ledger trial balance, and once again you can see the result in cash is what you expected, and now for the first time wage expense shows up as $1,400. The next one reads, November 9th, earned placement fees and received cash for $5,000. So that's the date. Obviously, cash is the debit for $5,000. And placement fees earned, which is the income account we have here, credit for $5,000. Okay. Now, before we save this, let's take a quick look at what the trial balance looks like now. Right now, cash is $4,200. But if we make a debit to cash of $5,000, can you predict what it will be? That's right. It will be $9,200. And obviously, right now, placement fees that are only $2,000 if we're going to make a credit to placement fees for $5,000, can you predict what the result will be? That's right. Placement fees should be $7,000. Let's save this transaction and take a look. As you can see, the results you predicted are correct. Now please note, the trial balance is only a summary of each account. In order to really see what was entered, you also need to see the detail in the individual general ledger accounts. This is very simple to do. Thus far in our little adventure, there have been only 2 general ledger accounts that have more than one transaction. Of course, the cash account was involved in several transactions and the placement fees earned. How can we open up this number and find out what this total placement fees earned consists of? Very simple. Anytime you want to explain a summary number, double-click directly on the number and the detail report will open up. Now, what are we looking at here? This report is actually the general ledger account called placement fees. It might not be that clear, but it is. You could see that it is an account in the general ledger of this particular company. This is the name that we put in when we set up the company. It shows the time periods of the active month, and the only way to know which account it really is to look over here. This is account number 411, placement fees earned. November 1, we had no beginning balance. November 3rd, from the general journal, we posted a credit of $2,000. November 9th, from the general journal, we posted a credit of $5,000. And as you can see, the balance has increased each time. Let me just get this. Okay, so now the balance goes up to $7,000, and that's the current balance there. This is also true in the T account cash has a current balance of $9,200. If we want to see what that consists of, we double-click, and we can see every previous transaction that we had that affected cash. In fact, every transaction, well, not every, but almost every transaction that we have affected cash. Here's one for November 1, here's one from November 5th, here's the one from November 7th, and here's the one from November 9th. And it has the appropriate debit and credit that we put when we recorded it in the journal. And as always, it has whatever the current balance is. Now, you may well ask, what if I wanted to examine more closely a particular transaction that is recorded in a particular general ledger account, like cash? No problem. If this is the one we want to examine more closely, we simply double-click on it, and the very screen that we entered this transaction onto will pop up, and it will give us the opportunity to change anything we want. For example, let's close this out and let's pick a different example. What if we wanted, now once again, let's reiterate that cash is now $9,200 and capital is $6,000. Well, what if we wanted to increase the amount of the transaction for the invested capital from $6,000 to $666,666? What would we do? Well, we double-click on the account that had the transaction recorded in it, and we find the transaction in question. Now we double-click on that transaction, and we come back to the very same window that we used to record that transaction. In that window, we can change almost anything we want. All right, for example, if I made this $666,666, I would have to make this $666,666. And what if I didn't want it into the capital account? What if instead I wanted to put it into the account payable account? Now, when we come back to the trial balance, cash will be a giant number, account payable will be a giant number, bigger than these, and of course, capital will be 0 because I just removed the only transaction for capital. Let me save this. And of course, we have to reopen fresh our trial balance. General ledger trial balance. When we reopen, cash is this huge giant number here. Account payable is this huge giant number there. And capital has disappeared. And you may well ask, why did capital disappear? Because we removed the only transaction that was recorded in capital, and therefore it no longer. If I want to fix this condition, I could choose between either of these two accounts to double-click and open and find the transaction. For example, I could double-click the cash, and I could find the transaction here, and I could fix it that way. But I could also double-click the account payable, and I could go into the account payable general ledger account, because that same transaction is listed in the account payable general ledger account. Then, of course, if I double-click right on the line of the transaction, I go back to the window that I originally recorded the transaction in, and of course I could change the amount back to what it was, and I could actually even change the account back to the correct account, in this case A. Glover Capital. Then when I click Save, you will then see that when the trial balance is reopened fresh, and now cash is back to normal, account payable is back to normal, and capital is back to normal. And now finally, let's take a look at what the trial balance looks like after I put in the 3 remaining transactions. And here it is. As you can see, the numbers are exactly as they are supposed to be at the end of exercise 3A3 that we did together in class during accounting 1.